We asked storytellers to select a type of story and some words to inspire the stories that they tell.
When I was 14 years old, my parents sent me off to Wyoming on a trip for a month to go hiking in the wilderness. I found out later this trip is mostly for kids who were having a rough time in their teenage years. They, by and large, I should say, were involved in like drinking or drugs or just other things that we definitely shouldn't have been involved in yet. And so this trip was under the guise of being a leadership building trip, but really it was to keep us clean for a month and then teach us about the outdoors and nature. So I was the youngest kid on the trip. A lot of them were 17, 18 years old. So being 14 was a little bit weird in that environment, but it also meant that it was like more physically difficult for me than it was for everybody else. We had to carry very heavy packs because we'd go out into the wilderness for like 7 days at a time and camp and cook our own food and do all kinds of camping stuff, which I'd never done before in my life. But I actually found that I really enjoyed it during the first 7-day expedition. And then we came back to civilization, if you will, and spent a couple of days outside of a town at a real campground with showers and whatnot. And then we went on our second 7-day expedition in which we're going to be climbing up a very tall, hiking up a very tall mountain. And at the top, it was something like 9,000 feet. And so the weather changes very drastically when you get up to a height like that, which I did not know. And as we got closer and closer to the summit, we got stuck in a blizzard. And there were probably 12 of us together on this. There were a couple of older folks, like actual adults who were leading the expedition, and then the rest of us teenagers. And we all had rain gear with us for something like this. But I didn't really get mine out fast enough. And so all my clothes got really wet. It was also very cold. And I put all the rain gear on eventually, and I kept hiking, but I got very, very cold, like as cold as I've ever been. And the blizzard and the wind is just, pounding us as we're getting up to where we finally had to make camp before we got to the summit. And I was apparently, I don't really remember this very well, but according to everyone else who was there, acting very strangely while we were trying to eat dinner that night. Like I was just kind of really loopy and out of it. I couldn't really hear people when they were talking to me. And so the counselors then decided that, they needed to hustle me to bed. So they got me like stripped out of my wet clothes. I'm down to just my long underwear and into my sleeping bag. And then they were throwing like blankets on top of me. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night though with flashlights like shining into my eyes, and everyone kind of whispering in hushed tones and asking if I was okay, and just kind of waking up and freaking out, having no idea where I was, because I was somewhere in the middle of Wyoming. I still don't really know exactly where I was, but I slept for almost 14 hours that night, and I woke up the next morning, and I couldn't really recall everything that had happened since we'd gotten to the campsite. And it turned out that I had a case of hypothermia, and once they'd recognized that, my symptoms, that's when they got me hustled into the sleeping bag to try to get me warmed up again. And I wouldn't say it was like miraculous that I survived, but it was a little touch and go there for a while. They were considering whether or not they're gonna have to try to call in a helicopter to come and pick me up after the storm had passed. But I was young, and I guess I was strong enough to make it through that. So I didn't have to evacuate in the end. I kind of caught a little bit of a head cold, but we all hiked up to the summit the next day, and I saw some of the most amazing sights that I've ever seen in my life. We were way up above the tree line, up above the clouds, looking out for miles and miles. And as a 14-year-old, I don't think I realized the sort of danger that I was in. But as an almost 40-year-old now, I realize that's probably the closest that I've ever really come to dying. But I'm glad I didn't know it at the time, and I think it was probably worth it in the end.